Let me ask you. Do you remember the very first time you felt that small, sharp pinch of hesitation? It wasn't a disaster. It wasn't a scream or a broken promise. Maybe it was just a plan they changed at the last minute without asking, or a comment about your appearance that felt a little too pointed to be a joke. You had a choice in that moment. You felt the urge to say, "Hey, that's not okay," but then you looked at them, and you chose peace instead. You let it slide. Well, look, that wasn't just a one-off moment of being nice. To them, that was a successful data point. They were testing the perimeter of your self-respect to see where the fence ends. Are you telling, you thought that by being flexible, you were showing them how to love you? It's a heavy realization, but in their world, your flexibility is just an invitation. They don't see your patience as a virtue, they see it as a green light. I have a question. Have you noticed how the favors they ask for keep getting bigger, while the thank yous keep getting smaller? That's not an accident. They push a little further because you let them, and every time you stay silent, you're inadvertently drawing a new map for them. You're telling them exactly how much of yourself you're willing to give away to avoid a conflict. All right. Look, the truth is that for a manipulator, limits don't exist until they hit a wall. If they don't hit a wall, they just keep walking. They aren't looking for a partner, they're looking for a footprint. They want to see how much of your territory they can occupy before you finally snap. And the scariest part? By the time you're ready to snap, they've already moved the line so far that you can't even remember where you started. Pardon me, but I'd like to ask, when did you become the person who apologizes for things you didn't even do? Think about it. You're literally rehearsing how to bring up a basic boundary without upsetting them. You're editing your own soul in real time just to keep the temperature at a level that's comfortable for someone else. Well, look, let's be honest. That's not a partnership. That's a negotiation where you're the only one trying to save the situation, and the cost is your own peace of mind. Are you saying, you really believe that if you just explain your feelings one more time, in just the right tone, with just the right amount of understanding, they'll suddenly have an epiphany? Oh, that's rich. It's almost sweet, if it weren't so exhausting. I have a question. Have you ever noticed how they only seem to misunderstand the things that require them to actually respect you? They're geniuses when it comes to their own needs, their own schedule, and their own ego. But the moment you say, "I need you to stop doing that," suddenly they're the most confused person on the planet. "I didn't mean it like that," or "You're just being sensitive again." It's a classic move. It's the confused defender play. They act like your boundaries are some complex, ancient language they just can't quite translate. But let's look at the reality. Would you mind if I ask, if they can follow the rules everywhere else, why is it that you're the only one who gets the version of them that just can't help pushing the limit? It's because they know exactly where the line is. They aren't lost, they're exploring. They're seeing how much ground they can take before you actually plant your feet. Are you telling, you think you're being patient by letting the small things go? Let's call it what it actually is, you're subsidizing their bad behavior with your own silence. Every time they push a little further and you stay quiet to avoid the drama, you're essentially paying a tax on your own existence. You're telling them that your comfort is negotiable, but theirs is sacred. All right. Look, The reason they keep pushing isn't because they don't know it hurts you. It's because the cost of hurting you is currently zero. There's no consequence. There's no stop sign. There's just you, moving the fence back another foot every single time they lean on it. They aren't going to stop until they run out of space to take. And if you don't stop moving the fence, they never will. Is it okay if I ask, what exactly are you afraid will happen if you finally say no and actually mean it? We tell ourselves we're being the bigger person, but let's be real. Usually, we're just terrified of the reaction. We're terrified of the cold shoulder, the explosive anger, or that exhausting, circular argument that leads nowhere. So, you give in. You let them push just a little further today so you don't have to deal with the fallout. Well, look, here is the harsh reality. Every time you trade your boundaries for a moment of quiet, you aren't actually buying peace. You're just financing a lifestyle of disrespect. Are you telling, you think they'll eventually notice your sacrifice and reward you with basic decency? That's not how this works. In a power game, your sacrifice isn't a gift, it's a surrender. I have a question. How much of you is even left at this point? When you spend all your energy monitoring their mood and adjusting your behavior to fit their moving targets, you disappear. You become a background character in your own life. They push because they can, and they'll keep pushing until there is nothing left of the original person they met. They aren't interested in your yes if it's given freely, they want the yes that they've squeezed out of you. Listen. There comes a moment where the being nice excuse just stops working. You can only tell yourself you're being patient for so long before that lie starts to taste like ash in your mouth. At the end of the day, you aren't being patient, you're being a spectator to your own mistreatment. And yet, you're still there, waiting for a sign that it's okay to finally stand up. Believe it or not, the sign you're looking for isn't going to come from them. They aren't going to walk into the room one day and say, you know what? I've realized I've been pushing you too far, and I've decided to stop. That's a fairy tale. Here's the thing, people who profit from your lack of boundaries are never going to be the ones who tell you to build them. Why would they? They have a great deal going on right now. They get their way, and you get the bill. I mean, if you think about it, you've basically become a human shock absorber. Every time they throw a tantrum, every time they forget a promise, every time they push that boundary just an inch further, you absorb the impact so the relationship doesn't break. But what about you? You're the one cracking under the pressure while they stay perfectly intact. To be fair, you might think you're saving the relationship, but in a way, you're actually destroying it. You're building a foundation of resentment that is eventually going to cave in. Let me put it this way, how much of your identity have you traded away just to keep them from being annoyed with you? Let's just say it's more than you'd like to admit. You've become a master at reading the room, at checking the weather of their mood before you even dare to speak your own truth. Interestingly, the more you shrink, the more room they take up. It's a vacuum. On top of that, you're exhausted. You're tired of the mental gymnastics required to justify why it's not that bad. But see, that exhaustion is actually a gift. It's your soul telling you that the limit has been reached. Even so, you're probably still hesitant. You're worried that if you stop being the shock absorber, everything will shatter. Well, maybe it needs to. If a relationship only stays together because you're willing to be walked on, is it actually a relationship? Or is it just a long-term surrender? Can I pose a question? How much longer are you willing to wait for them to decide you've had enough? Because if you're waiting for a manipulator to develop a conscience and stop their own momentum, you're going to be waiting forever. They aren't going to wake up tomorrow and suddenly value your boundaries more than the power they get from crossing them. The push only stops when it hits something that won't move. Well, look, I know it feels risky. I know that drawing a line feels like you're starting a war. But let's be honest, the war is already happening, you're just the only one getting hit. You know, you'd rather live in a state of constant retreat than face the discomfort of standing your ground. You've been trading your self-respect for a fake version of peace for way too long. It's time to stop worrying about how they'll react and start worrying about what happens to you if you stay quiet. Believe it or not, what if the thing you're so afraid of losing, their approval, their presence, their love, is actually the weight that's keeping you down? If the only way they'll stay is if you let them walk all over you, then they've already left the person you actually are. They're just staying for the convenience. Look. It starts with one no. Not a no followed by a 10-minute explanation. Not a no, that sounds like an apology. Just a no. You have to be willing to let the silence be heavy. You have to be willing to let them be upset without rushing in to fix it. The line exists the moment you decide it's more important than their comfort.